Hello, everyone. My name is Lucie Lederhendler. I am the curator at the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba, and I am the curator of the exhibition, Nothing Smells in Absolute Zero, by Brandon's own artist, Chris Reid. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the sponsors for this exhibition, including the Canada Council for the Arts, the Manitoba Arts Council, and the City of Brandon. We also have three generous community sponsors. They include the New System Store and Dr. Derry Dector, who are two almost next door neighbors to the gallery. And Sutton Harrison Realty, especially Angela Burgess and Aubrey Arellano, who are responsible for this beautiful exhibition brochure, which you can come pick up at the gallery. And also, it seems like we're occupying virtual space more often than not these days, but it must not be forgotten that we also reside on Treaty 2 territory, the ancestral homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as the shared lands of the Cree, Oji-Cree, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples. If you are not also residing on this particular territory, I would ask that you take a moment to reflect on the Indigenous and settler legacies of the space that you are currently occupying so that we as a people will never take the privilege of space for granted again. I also urge you to keep those thoughts in your mind during the upcoming conversation that I'll be having with Chris Reid today, as it's the same mechanisms that begin with the occupation of land that result now in the disproportionate representation of Indigenous people experiencing homelessness and addiction. And I hope that broad recognition of the direct link between these two scenarios might be a small act of repair. Now, I know that Chris likely doesn't need any introduction to many of you, but in case we have anyone new in our audience today, I would like to tell them that Chris has exhibited, taught, worked, and generally participated with the AGSM innumerable times in the past, including 3 solo exhibitions, beginning as far back as 2006. Her MFA is from the Art Institute of Chicago, and she has lived right here in Brandon with her family for decades. She worked as a housing resource worker for many years until she recently began development on a sober living facility here in downtown Brandon. I would like to remind everyone that you can use the comment section wherever you're joining us from, and we will respond to your questions and comments at the end of this event. So all of that non-artist work that Chris does, if there is such a thing as non-artist work, is more relevant in this exhibition than ever, which is what we're going to be talking about today as we tour around the show. So welcome, Chris, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, I would like to say some thank yous, if that's okay. This project involved research. I interviewed a lot of people. I was graciously accepted into a few places, even with COVID, causing all kinds of disruptions to what I originally planned for the project. But briefly, I wanted to thank the Canada Council for the Arts, the Manitoba Arts Council, the Community Health and Housing Association, Brandon Neighborhood Renewal Corporation, the Harm Reduction Network, Housing First, Samaritan House Ministries, the Safe and Warm Shelter, Westman Women's Shelter, Women's Resource Center, the YWCA Meredith Place, as well as I think I interviewed somewhere between 20 and 30 people. And then there were people who helped me out in other ways with the project, and that includes Florence Hellcrow, Debbie Huntinghawk, Carly Morisseau, Sharon Mullins, Holly Parrott, and Corrine Robinson, and of course, my family, Lydia, Emil, and Tony, who put up with me making stuff in the living room, as well as in my studio. So, and of course, all of the staff at the AGSM has been amazing. So thank you to everybody who helped out.
Well, for my part, absolute pleasure. I thought, unless there's somewhere very specific that you wanted to start, we could either start with the first thing that somebody would see walking into the space, or we could start by talking about where you and I started back in January, what we started talking about as you were explaining this to me. Do you have an opinion?
Let's start with where you and I started with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what the driving question that you explained to me in our first phone conversation was that there was a camp town across the street, a tent city across the street from your house, basically, and you couldn't figure out, you were trying to wrap your head around kind of why it was allowed to have those residents in tents there.
Yeah, it was kind of like a campground. It was in the neighbor's yard basically every summer. Things seem to have changed this year. They're fixing up the yard a little more. But for a few years, summer would happen and there would be this stream of guests in the front yard. And also, the neighborhood that I live in is generally lower income. So there's always a lot of people walking by. The thing that gelled it the most for me was this sort of campsite that was on a residential street. Well, part of it's on the corner, so part of it's residential, and the other part is zoned commercial. And it was existing in my neighborhood year after year after year. And I kind of wondered why. I began to wonder why certain neighborhoods would allow for more leniency in how in the behaviors and how yards were used than it seemed in other neighborhoods. And I think that was in part because of the population I've been working with.
Yeah, and that ties in a lot to a question that you've asked yourself and your colleagues professionally as well, is why do some landlords, what makes them more permissive and more tolerant of people that are more difficult to house?
Exactly. Why are some landlords allowing for housing to become overcrowded? They put up with more parties. They put up with, they will have tenant after tenant abandon the apartment with no notice. And though I think oftentimes there's the assumption that this is a problem, and people don't look at how this is actually a resource for certain people. And so it has a different kind of value.
Yeah. Let's so you've been quite obsessed with one of these kind of overcrowded places. It's the painting that we can see behind you. If Anna could share my picture, my screen. So this is the painting that Chris is sitting in front of. Do you want to tell us what this building is?
Okay, this was a house that was subdivided into apartments, I think 4, maybe, I know more than 3, but whether it was 4 or 5, I don't know. It had some long-term tenants, but it also had a number, there was movement in and out of a number of the suites. There's been all kinds of events that have happened in that place that I'm aware of, the kind of thing that I refer to where overcrowding is allowed, like 11 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. A few years ago, one of the tenants set fire to the place, and it was a situation that was well publicized in the paper. Here. So I took photographs of it, the house after the fire, and all of the wonderful icicles that formed on it, and did a painting of it and 2 sculptures, which I'm sure we'll see in a moment. There they are. So variations on that house, a winter version and a summer version. I'm going to refer back to the painting. In the corner of the painting, there's a rabbit. Inside the rabbit is a duck. Inside the duck is an egg. Inside the egg is a syringe. And that makes reference to, there's a character in Slavic mythology, Koschei the Deathless. And that character cannot be killed unless you find his soul, which is a needle in a egg, in a duck, in a rabbit, which is usually in a chest buried under a tree. So Koschei can wander wherever and no one can kill him unless his soul is found and broken. So for my purposes, I changed the needle to a syringe, because it's this idea, this is where I start to refer a little bit to addictions, because of the idea, I kind of felt like sometimes when people were using a lot of substances, it was like who they are and where their body's at when they're using are two different things.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from.
And we see that motif again here, but in this case, the ducks are outside of the rabbits.
Well, I think, yeah. I think that rabbit has the duck in it. Yeah, those two. So that motif again, and this is the 8th Street Bridge, which it no longer exists, just like the house no longer exists. It was no longer safe for vehicles, but it people camped under there. There were issues with people camping, drinking underneath the bridge for years. But it also served to for pedestrians, it was very convenient to get across the 8th Street Bridge, to get from a north side neighborhood to a neighborhood just south of the bridge. And both neighborhoods are generally a little lower income neighborhoods. Yeah. And so, sorry?
So in not rebuilding it, basically they're saying if you don't have a car, then you have to walk 9 blocks one way or another to cross. It's exactly. For car people, it doesn't matter at all, but for pedestrians, it matters quite a lot.
Exactly. And I mean, with Brandon, that 8th Street Bridge, sort of the butt end that was on the corner of 8th and Pacific, is right in line with where our existing food bank is, and the bus turnaround or the main bus terminal. So really close to a lot of resources.
And this is a sculpture. This is a 17-foot sculpture that you made.
17 feet long. So I used architectural drawings, and this is actually about 5 times the size of the architectural drawings.
Oh,
yeah. So this end of it represents the end that would have been on Pacific and 8th, and has people living under it. Although it's not like,
Yeah. So we do have the architectural drawings up as well in the lobby outside of the entrance. If anybody wanted to come take a look at them, I always think that they're really beautiful to watch. And here's a source photograph of that house, that the 4th and Louise house that you were referencing. Yeah. So let's move to the other 8th Street Bridge painting, because I think people will be familiar with it from the invitations and the ads and everything. So once again, this is a portion of the bridge that's really made for people to access below it, for pedestrians, right?
Right, exactly. That's the pedestrian ramp up to the bridge. This is another one where I've made reference to Slavic myths. I've got a chicken leg on one of the pillars, which is my reference to Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga, the myth of Baba Yaga is she's a witch that lives in a house that's on chicken legs, and it moves around when she leaves. So I sometimes make references to Baba Yaga in relation to housing and housing security, because I think of her house as, do those chicken legs protect your house, or does it mean that you leave and your house disappears on you because it's got legs of its own? So this bridge basically disappeared on people, and it was for some people, at least a temporary shelter or a temporary kind of home or a meeting place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's keep going with I was saying I keep calling them extinct places because I'm new to Brandon. So instead of just being demolished or gone, it's like I will never get to know them. It is like there's a cultural artifact that no longer exists in all of these spaces. So let's look at here we go. This is one half of a pair of paintings on 10th Street.
Right. So this is the top part of this building is residential. The bottom part is business. And this is the back of, obviously.
Yeah.
But at one point, many years ago, I knew some people who were living in that apartment, and someone set fire to the staircase. The woman who was living there at the time panicked and ran down the stairs. So her legs were really severely burned. So I call this painting the kitten who knew too much. Cats are another thing that I use in a lot of my work. For a whole bunch of reasons I won't go into right now. But the thing is that, the place is fixed up a little bit right now. It looks a whole lot better. The stairs have been rebuilt, and it's kind of like no one knows about the past that was here like years before.
Yeah, so we can see that also with this partner painting, which is newer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is the front of that back building.
Right. And this painting is actually, it makes reference to the, this idea that there's something you don't know about happening in these buildings at one time. But the empty space is kind of more of the subject in this case, because it's about another house that was again split into a number of suites and that housed lower income individuals.
I'm just seeing this face now. I've been staring at this painting for months. Look at that. Wow.
and there's hands too.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed all the we'll get to the hands in your ink drawings as well.
Yeah.
So these we've already seen the cat-headed man.
Right.
And this is Baker's daughter.
Right.
Who you've been representing for your whole career, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, years and years.
Yeah.
And
this is them repeated, or these are ghosts of residences?
That's them basically repeated. They're kind of avatars. And I don't know why I would do this here, but like the cat is kind of an avatar for my husband, and the baker's daughter is an avatar for me. I honestly don't know why that kind of happened. But I guess I put them places because that's where I've been, where he's been, like it is, these things are done from my perspective.
Yeah, I find I having seen the last time that you were here was for this exhibition,
right?
Which was much more fantastical. So that was 2013, and looking through all of those images in that catalog in the context of this current show, I just find it romantic and touching. They just stand together. They're never apart. They're soulmates somehow, which I think I would have gotten even without the backstory, just how often they're showing up and kind of playing with each other. And very cute. Let's go through some photographs, and then so that we can end up with Deadpool.
Okay.
And talk about that. So here's some of the documentary source material that you used. This for people that are watching at home. This is the top of the abutment before the train tracks, and this was where one of Chris's subjects.
Yeah. One of the people who is set up camp. So that's his camp up there.
and it's a sturdy camp is the impressive thing. It's both. It's done with such care, and
yeah, and like he recently was found an apartment, so he's moved indoors very recently, and now someone else has moved in, so it's weathered.
oh really?
Yeah, it's weathered not only the seasons, but now it's got its second tenant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, because it was made with a lot of care. You can tell.
Yeah.
For both privacy and warmth and comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another one of the source photographs. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's photographs that, you know, like you've just shown, like the lawn tractor in tent that, you know, at some point in time, I might do a painting based on that. It depends. It's just curious that someone who doesn't have stable housing would have a lawn tractor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's whether or not that's going to result in any other artwork at this point, I don't know. But I've got a collection of all kinds of
these kind of curiosities.
Yeah.
So these are photographs that are on display now. And then, like I said, there are more in some of the display cabinets. And then I wanted to go to, we saw that final photograph. So there's something in the tenderness of this bit of graffiti that you found in this house down the street, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this was a house down the street from me. The landlord was basically ignoring the fact that there were a lot of people coming and going. We were seeing ambulances there. We were seeing police there. The landlord finally came in to see what was going on, found out that there were people squatting as well as his tenants, evicted them, and within a week, the house was set on fire. After the day or so after, I went and photographed it, and I found this piece of graffiti that I don't know. It's like, how do people choose those particular heroes, like Deadpool? And it's kind of, it's like, obviously someone took some time to put this on the wall. I liked the way it was framed too, because sometimes there are formalist compositional things that I'm looking at.
Yeah. So then you did this house again with this sculpture.
Yeah. So that's the house with the part of the porch that was ripped off the front when the firemen had to get in to put the fire out. And then, you know, put on stilts. And those stilts, again, are a reference to the idea that a house may have legs and may leave on you, even though it's not chicken feet at the bottom. And then just the remains, like the trash and bits of bed frame and chairs, and, you know, like these kind of ghostly little people left over from the destruction.
Yeah, there's so many details in this one.
That's
okay. Let's talk about ghosts also. This is another one that I kind of forgot about until we got this, until I hung it up again. So we saw this kind of directly from a source photograph,
right?
And then this figure here is kind of this amalgam of a haunting and of it's kind of a fragility of, even if it's a built structure, there's nothing spiritually different about it than something that looks more fragile, like a pup tent and a lawn tractor.
Yeah. And I mean, like I know the figure could come across as a little ghostly, but I was also thinking of it in terms of, being able to get in. Right. Because I mean, you're not seeing any door into this interior space. And so, and the hands are flat against the glass. So I know I had to sort of wrestle with is it okay that it looks kind of ghostly?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But
I think that like a little bit spooky is kind of your aesthetic, and you're a little desensitized.
It's just, like, is it trite? That was the thing, was that putting ghostly figure by window, is that trite?
Right.
So I had to kind of come to terms with that. What I liked about this image when I started it was that the bed on the left doesn't have any legs.
Yeah.
So it's floating.
Yeah.
And I like that instability again, and that kind of, again, a little spooky, a little maybe magical.
Yeah. I wanted to go to drawings to talk about spooky but not spooky. But I also thought, I like to believe I'm telling the truth, that little comic panel. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
That one?
Yeah.
I'm just going to go through them quickly. They're just phone photographs as opposed to these professional ones. But so this is the oldest piece that we have. We say it's about 2007 probably that you made this panel. Let's just scroll through first so people have a chance to read. Okay. So do you want to tell us where that is? It's quite a terrifying story. Do you want to tell us where that came from?
That was an amalgamation of a number of conversations I had with different people when I was working in housing. So, it's like, I would, why are you looking for a place to live? Why don't you have a place to live? And you get these oddly, you get these oddly specific comments, like that may or may not relate directly to housing, like, people are disabled because their stomachs are frozen, but if you drink so much, like 2 liters of Pepsi, you can prevent disabilities. Your stomach won't freeze like that. Why Pepsi?
Yeah.
And so I would get caught up on these, like I said, oddly specific details, because even, further in this story, there's the one image where there's the rubber glove thing, but then there's the one where they think Aerosmith and Jughead are out to get them.
Yeah.
Again,
I've never seen them in the same room together. Maybe they're onto something.
Like I said, oddly specific, and kind of terrifying. But at the same time, you'd get this contrast that, yeah, things are actually okay. You know, there's something that could be much worse. You know, like, you know, so it was this amalgamation, like I said, of various people telling me these different stories.
This one in particular, I find just bizarre. You know, it's almost like a Mad Libs, this one.
Yeah. Again, one of those really strange specific things, like and yet explaining, like, here's the explanation for their reality. Right? You know, that has nothing, like, really, how does that have to do with reality? But, you know, so you're poor because you lost your paper bag. If I gave you paper bags, that wouldn't change your situation. But then there was always the positive, always something positive. I chose to, you know, a very, you know, the phrase about the demons, because I think, you know, or the hearing voices, or like the not knocking at the windows yet, just because it was a pretty terrifying idea that, you know, it could get worse from when I'm sitting in an office with someone and they're explaining their reality this way. And I have a home to go back to. I don't have these issues. I don't have this reality. And then there comes the positive, you know? So it's kind of a surreal place to be.
Yeah. So this was the moment when I was going to stop and go for audience questions, but there's so much we haven't covered. So if people do want to ask us questions, reminder that you can put them in the comment section of whatever platform you're using. And until I see those, I'm just going to make sure that everybody sees as much as I can show you. Let's make sure that we deal with the oral history installation. So this was one of the first kind of questions that you approached me with when we first met. Was I have the research is about oral histories, and it's kind of arts-based research, but how do I get them? It's important that it's in their words, and this is what you ended up coming up with. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So they're excerpts from the interviews that I did, and I just wrote them on sheets of plastic. I wanted to have something that was as, like, how do you visually represent spoken language in a way where, like, the words kind of disappear? So it's a silver marker on plastic. So they are kind of difficult to read.
These are backwards too, because I was inside. They're easier from the other side.
Yeah, they are, you know, like, it's a little bit difficult to read, but it's kind of difficult topics. It's makes reference to things like, you know, when you feel at home, things that have happened that have caused massive life changes, you know, what gives you comfort. So they're, like I said, they're specific, you know, particular excerpts from the interviews. The other thing, and Lucie, you had mentioned this to me, is that it kind of references how you would put plastic over a window that's broken. Kind of odd in the gallery with these perfect windows, and we've got like plastic on top of them. But yeah, it's to give the idea that give a permanence to words that aren't usually permanent. They're just conversational, and they aren't recorded anywhere.
Yeah. I don't want to give anything away from the interview that you conducted with some of your colleagues, but talking about, you know, who are you to tell me that my little my little patch of earth isn't as special as your house, you know?
Exactly.
If it's precious to them, then who are you? Yeah. So let's do some drawings now as well. This one especially references the kind of ominous thing that I think you personally don't think of it as creepy, and yet somehow it's really creepy.
This is First and Rosser here in, again in Brandon. It's kind of the entrance to our downtown core if you're coming off Highway 1, and it's older. It's not particularly well kept. I've got these trees that are never, they have, I tend to not draw trees in the summer. It tends to be fall or spring. So, there's not quite the kind of life that you'd like to see in a downtown core. But I like to pay homage. A lot of this is paying homage to places that haven't been honored or won't ever be honored.
Yeah. And that little bit of absurdity of why would something, like who makes those decisions about which neighborhoods,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What is important. So like this little drawing is between the tracks and the back of the buildings on Pacific Avenue. So, this isn't a place where most people would go for a walk. It's, but it is, close to that 8th Street Bridge that I did sculptures of. It's between, the 1st Street Bridge and the 8th Street Bridge.
And this is a good example to the audience of what I was talking about how they're just so cute together. Yeah. I lost my mouse. Yeah, here's cat-headed man in the same posture as we saw in the Baba Yaga 8th Street Bridge. Yeah. And again, he's a protector in these works, hey?
Yeah. Sort of overlooking, yeah. So
there's that guy.
Well, sometimes there's really corny jokes like, why did the chicken cross the road? And this, oddly enough, is a view from the art gallery windows. There's in the background, there's the building. There was a fire here. You might have noticed that I do a lot of pictures about places there were fires. So there was a major fire downtown a few years ago. So the building that's in the very back doesn't exist anymore.
This one here?
Yeah, that one there. And the embers from that building were blown over to the building right next to it, to the right of it, which is low-income housing. So we lost that building for a few years until it was renovated, and people have just moved into it, back into it within the last year. So it's one of those kind of urban renewal, but not urban, like they had renovated this building. People were supposed to be getting all of this housing, and then just a few years later, this fire happens and people lose that housing again. And so now we've got it back again. It's very, the buildings are solid and brick, but also transient in their own little way.
Yeah. Is there loss of life in these fires?
No.
He's a bunny again.
Yeah.
This one, I didn't know that this was called a bowler. The title of this drawing is Dog with Bowler. And I kept looking for a hat or like a bowling pin or something.
So, that's the trailer.
Yeah. So this one, I like the playing with scale, which you do quite a lot as well. And again, just the kind of the image of an overseer, of this kind of benevolent overseer. And this is another 8th Street Bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. 8th Street Bridge, with a couch, with, in the blanket, there's teeny tiny little demons.
Yeah.
And
all around the grasses and everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for people that aren't going to be able to see this in person, these drawings are all about 50, except for 2 of them. They're all about 50 inches. They're quite substantial drawings. Yeah. Are these monsters? I don't think so. Okay.
But what I liked about this was that juxtaposition of a very neat and tidy yard right next to this camp.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't made that. Yeah. That's great. It's like literally going from under the bridge to not is kind of this
exactly
return to a different kind of civilization, in the sense of like in the Star Trek sense of it, civilization, just a different culture, so completely.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we talked about the oral history, but I'm gonna play just a couple seconds from your animation, which this was taken. You'll see. I don't want to play the whole thing because I want to keep it special. But you'll see that it uses the same technique as referencing verbatim what a response to your survey question was. Do you want to say anything about this? Do you want to play it first?
Play it first, I think.
And I'm going to skip ahead. Like I said, I don't want to give it away until we decide to. So yeah, this imagery of the kind of decaying figure.
Yeah.
And cats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that again, like you alluded to, I used an excerpt directly from one of the interviews that I did. I like this phrase because of the way it kind of piled up some of the issues, cigarettes and dirty clothes and cats. And I, like I said, I reference cats a lot, and I do a lot of cat drawings. So I thought, this is perfect. And I wanted, like, this is the first animation I've done. So it was a bit of a learning curve. Now that I look at it, there's things I could do or redo.
Sure.
The thing is that I did want that idea of, I wanted like the cigarettes and the clothes and the cats to sort of echo the idea of problems piling up.
Yeah, it's cumulative.
Yeah, overwhelming, right? Yeah.
Like this, you could tidy, but by the end of the animation, it's impossible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excuse me. So I did also want to say that, oh, forgive me. I've lost it completely. That I'm just going to come up with something else then. That's gone. That's out of my head. So I think in your vernacular spotlight, I think that's where I read it. We do have one question. The questions aren't working on the event page. No. So if you go directly to the video, you should be able to do it. But we'll answer Kate's question soon. That you said that because you have this really, really all-encompassing day job that a lot of people would get overwhelmed with, but you still make sure that you make art on a really strict schedule so that you do have this double. And as it seems like you've always done that and successfully been able to keep both careers going. Yeah. And I was wondering about your experience of being so literal about referencing your day job in your art practice, because like we saw this piece from 2007, it's completely pertinent. But then approaching it with your day job being your research site and then your art being a reflection of that. How was that experience for you?
Making a conscious effort because previously it was kind of like, here's an idea that I have to work through, right? Like the series of I Like to Believe I'm Telling the Truth, those panels, or even the big ink drawings. That felt more like I was exploring something instinctively, and I didn't bother trying to analyze where it was going or what was going on with it. With this project, where I'm very consciously taking other people's words as my research, I'm finding it's harder to play, for one thing, with images, because I have to be careful with, because I am taking another person or trying to understand another person's perspective in a different way. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And where it seems like, and we talked about the ethics of this project as well at length, where the outcome looks very similar to old work, but there is, there's something just essentially different about being reflective, that you're using somebody else's experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's part of the reason for the research, is that I came to realize that, it is only my perspective, and having the opportunity to interview all of these people is a privilege. So it's like, I guess it is the care that I have to take with what I'm choosing to put where, and how I'm choosing to alter images. Yeah.
So that links quite well into Kate Eldred's question. She says, I'm curious why there is such a cute little girl with the X eyes in the series of drawings with words about why Pepsi is good in paper bags. What does she represent? So this is a good example of what you're saying of in the old days, this is the baker's daughter.
Yeah. And I mean, that goes way back. I mean, like that whole idea, the whole image of the girl with the X's for eyes, actually goes back to a response I made to a disabled girl who went to elementary school at the same time as me, who was the baker's daughter. So, like, this is that idea of how, how people's stories come into play in my work, how I've just sort of appropriated some of these things in the past, getting away from that and being more conscious of, when you're going to take an image, how you're going to use that image. Over the years, like I said, the baker's daughter has, I guess, become an avatar for me, because maybe I'm playing the role in these images, but I like the kind of the way that the X's for eyes could also be seen as crosses for eyes, which could also be seen as cross-eyed, which, like, how does that play with your vision? It just goes, it's like, sometimes I just play with those ideas.
Yeah.
And I guess she became my avatar because I put myself in a lot of these places.
Yeah. I remembered my question.
Okay.
My comment. It was about the smell and how we ended up with the title "Nothing Smells an Absolute Zero," which is that you had to kind of iterate your interview questions with these participants because they kept giving you very literal short answers about what they think of as home. And once you started asking about smell, it opened up this idea of the memories that they had and these impressions. And that is leading me with an inelegant transition. I think that it would be a shame if we didn't talk about one of the most ethically relevant parts of your work in both careers, which is the understanding that freedom of choice is a very loaded thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That people have to be willing to have the freedom to make bad choices. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That, when it comes to housing and working with people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, it's hard to know that someone is going to a situation that I would consider not safe or not good, but I have to allow someone to do that.
Yeah.
If someone chooses to go sleep outside rather than go sleep at the shelter, that's their choice. As much as I can say, oh, well, that's not safe. Well, it's cold out. Well, you're going to it's raining today. It's like, you have to respect that.
Yeah. Because ultimately the alternative would be using force, which is not. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's a hard thing to grapple with all the time.
Yeah. I'm going to, we have a comment from Erin, who is in Brandon and so excited to come see it in person, and is just grateful that you were able to speak about this before and in preparation for the exhibit. I think that has this lovely painting is the poster that we used for the exhibition pamphlet, the billfold. And this is another one that's very documentary and riddled with bunnies,
Yes.
which is why it's the perfect sample. And you can see this, I believe, was the station after everybody had been kicked out, or is this the state that they were living in?
Well, it's before. This was a camp in the Greyhound, in the Greyhound station area where the dumpsters used to be before the Greyhound station was closed. This was the camp before the city cleaned it up.
Okay.
So somewhere in between that time that someone was living there and the time that it was destroyed.
Yeah. Which brings us back kind of full circle to what we opened with yesterday for that quick tour of trying to approach this exhibition as something that's quite nonfiction, even though there are all of these mystical elements, all of these nonsensical elements to your imagery. Just the lack of humans is really marked in this one, and the presence of human action is there really heavily as well. Yeah. Okay, so we're at 2:30 now Central Time. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, Chris. We have lots more events coming up associated with this exhibition, so be sure to follow us on all of our social medias, and we will announce them as the days approach.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.